Welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm very excited. It's my first webinar, so a little bit nervous, I have to say, and also a little bit sick. So if I do speak a little bit too fast or you can't understand what I'm saying, let me know and I'll slow down. Feel free to use the chat as well. But first of all, before we get started, if I'm even able to change slides, this is the first technical glitch. Here we go. All right, a big hello from 9X. So for those of you, probably most of you maybe in the call that haven't heard of 9X before, Alex and Piv or Pierre-Yves are the co-founders of 9X, and I'm going to be joining as a guest instructor for the next edition of the 9X Automation Bootcamp, which we'll talk a little bit more about at the end of the webinar. But basically the three of us, what we have in common, I guess, is we've all worked in Berlin startups over the past 7 years. And all of us in business roles. So Alex and Piv were more working in operations and management, myself obviously in marketing and growth, which is why I'm hosting this webinar. So none of us are developers. None of us are, sorry, I just had a change in Zoom, but all good. None of us are developers. We haven't done any sort of software programming or anything like that. We're all business people that along the way sort of had the realization that we could leverage the technology available to us to automate a lot of the things that we were doing on our own. So normally when we were coming up with new processes, doing them manually, having the ability to then automate them and move on to other tasks, it really helped us. And I guess it was a big part of the reason why we've sort of been successful in our work. And also we were able to implement this mindset of automation first in the companies that we worked for and the teams that we managed. And so now together with 9X, we sort of want to share this knowledge with even more companies and in this case, more marketing teams as well.
Can you share again the screen? Maybe, Jan, we don't see your screen anymore. Sorry.
Okay, so Zoom did drop out.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me know. I really hate Zoom for this reason.
Perfect. We're back on. We're
back. Thank you. Okay, so how the webinar will go today, we'll give you a quick intro into no code, low code, I guess give you my take on the definitions and what it means, then focus on the current challenges in marketing and growth in 2022, and spoiler how no code can actually help overcome these challenges. And then thirdly, which I'm really excited about, I think it's going to be a very, very useful session. I'm going to give you a live demo of 4 no-code automations for marketing that you can build using a tool called Make, which is a very exciting tool. So yeah, stick around for that. And lastly, we'll finish off with a Q&A. We have a Q&A at the end, but feel free as we're moving throughout the session, if you have a question on what I'm speaking about or what I'm demoing, at the point, feel free to use the chat and Alex and Piv will interrupt me when it makes sense and we can answer those questions when it's relevant. Cool. All right, moving on. If I can change slide, perfect. So no code and low code, I guess maybe one of the reasons why you're joining today is you're hearing this term come up more and more about no code development and low code. People are sort of confused. What's the difference? For me, when we talk about no-code or no-code development platforms, it's about allowing programmers and non-pro programmers to create applications or software without writing code. Yeah, so that's what it means by no code. It means that you're not actually writing code. And how you are actually programming then this software is visually through some sort of visual builder using graphical user interfaces. So either drag and drop workflows or filling out forms, giving instructions that way. You're not writing the code. You're using a graphical interface to use visual development. Yeah, and I guess how low code then only differs from no code, it's very much the same. One important part of both of them is that the build environment is provided for you. And what that means is you don't have to worry about the infrastructure or the architecture of the application that you're building, right? You don't need to worry about, okay, how am I going to push this to the server, or where's it going to be hosted? Am I using AWS? All these sort of things. With both no code and low code, the environment is taken care of for you. And there's this aspect of visual development, but where low code differs, it just allows you to have the added possibility of using some code to give you extra functionality. But both no code and low code, it's really about making programming available to more users. This is a saying that I like to use a lot, and that's why it was worthy of the Joey GIF. So whether it's no code or low code, you still need to know code or understand it. And the reason being is to be really proficient with using no code technologies, you need to understand the underlying logic that's behind it. So when you're using a no code tool, underneath, it's still built on code. You're just not seeing that code, but you need to know that the instructions you give and the logic that you've applied, how that actually plays out. And one great thing about no code, it really brings on this scalability of automating, especially tasks and doing many tasks in a small amount of time. One thing to worry about though is if you have a smart idea and you automate it with no code, it's going to be smart at scale. But if you have a dumb idea and dumb logic and you use no code, you can make mistakes at scale as well. So really important to understand the logic about what's going on, and also understanding like the different data types and things like that will help you get a lot further in using no code or low code. All right, now moving on to marketing and growth in 2022 and some of the challenges that we're facing. So there's definitely a big explosion in complexity and difficulty that most marketing teams are facing at the moment. And this we're sort of splitting up into three main trends. So the first one is that the number of channels that marketing managers need to manage are forever growing. So new channels are popping up. Combined with this, we're seeing that maybe your tried and tested channels that you're using are potentially now giving diminishing returns, right? The market's getting a bit saturated. A channel that you've relied on for the last X amount of time is no longer giving you the same returns as it once did. And thirdly, the number of marketing tools out there has just exploded. And to go take this one a little bit further, really having trouble changing slides. Here we go. In terms of the number of marketing tools that are out there and that it's continuing increasing, there's a really useful resource called the Yearly Marketing Technology Landscape. So for any MarTech nerds out there, I really recommend checking this one out. It's from Chief MarTech, a website that's sort of giving this report on a yearly basis. And you can see that just in the last 5 years, the number of solutions on offer to marketing teams has almost doubled from 5,000 in 2017 to almost 10,000 today. And of course, like no marketer is going to be using all of these 10,000 tools at once. But it just shows that there's a demand out there for all these different tools. And another trend that we're noticing is the new tools coming up are no longer these sort of all-in-one solutions, right? So a lot of us might know HubSpot, which says, okay, you can have your website on HubSpot, you can do your email marketing on HubSpot, we'll sync your ad audiences to HubSpot. The new tools coming out aren't these sort of all-in-one approaches, but they're really specific use cases. So specific tools around influencer marketing, for instance. And it just means that you're much rather using these specialized tools, but more of them. And this can lead to complexity as well. Yes, so putting these trends, I guess, what's the impact? It's just basically making work for marketers increasingly challenging. So these are some stats from Airtable's yearly marketing trend reports, which were quite interesting. So we saw that of the marketing leaders that were asked, 95% of them reported that there was an increased workload, and in terms of the amount of requests and campaigns coming in. Yeah, and I think combine that with the current situation of probably budgets being decreasing with the current financial situation, and as well as maybe team sizes getting smaller, still having to deliver even more campaigns and even more content requests. It's a big burden on many marketing teams. On top of this, there's a lot of siloed workflows between departments that marketing depend on. So marketing is obviously working closely with many other teams within an organization, whether it's product, creative, design, and these teams having individual workflows makes, I guess, efficient collaboration very difficult. And the third sort of challenge that we're seeing as a result of these trends is that 36% of the data that marketing leaders need to make analytical decisions is often duplicated across multiple sources. So it's in several different spreadsheets, several documents, maybe it's in internal wikis or apps, and they're really lacking a single source of truth. But for me, one of the biggest challenges that we have as marketers or even business operators in general is trying to avoid repetitive tasks. So 94% of us will spend some portion of our day performing repetitive and time-consuming tasks. And this for me is a massive creativity killer. So whether these are manual data entry, copying data from one source to another, running recurring reports. Let's say you need to give a daily update to your manager, weekly update to the company, monthly update. These recurring tasks that you need to do take up a massive amount of time. And also this monotonous work just kills your creativity. It ends up with disengaged employees. And that's really, in the end, impacting creativity and company profitability. So what we're seeing now is that successful teams are leveraging no code to meet these challenges. And I think what's already a very good indicator is that 80% of marketers are already using no code tools. And this is a massive opportunity, potentially that they're not understanding the full scale of what these no code tools can do, but vast majority are is the tools you're using to run your website, your CRM, they have aspects of no code, and just unlocking this trigger about what you can do with them really increases productivity. So there's a very low barrier of entry to adopt no code in your marketing work. And we obviously saw the result of that in 2022 with automation increasing in marketing teams by 35%. This next slide I've just put together to showcase that automation is not just for the technical areas of marketing. It really covers everything from social media to SEO, content marketing. There's a bunch of things you can automate. These are just some examples. And yeah, we'll share this slide later on as well, so you have it there for reference. So now, before we move on to the demo part, is there already any questions we have about no code, low code? Anything in the chat, Pivo, Alex?
No, so far so good.
Okay, that means either you've understood nothing and don't have questions, or everything's understood, which is good.
I think this was crystal clear.
Perfect.
All
right. Now let's go into the exciting part, which is the demo of 4 automations that we can build using Make. Make was previously called Integromat. It is like when I discovered this tool, it really was a life changer. We're not sponsored by Make, by the way, just as I wish we were, but Make aren't paying us to put this together. But Make allows you to build your own workflows, or if you think about it, mini bits of software or microservices. And the way they do this is by connecting the different tools that you're already using on a daily basis. So they're basically a visual API builder. So it's fully no code. You can connect, if your tool that you're using has an API, you can basically automate it with Make. And what's even better is you don't even need to learn necessarily know how to use APIs to use Make, because Make have pre-built over 1,000 integrations with the most popular tools out there. So let's get into the demo. Welcome to Make. This is the Make dashboard here. We're in the 9X account. So if I go into my scenarios, you can see a lot of scenarios here, but we will clean this up by checking out the demo for no code and marketing and growth. So these are the 4 automations that I want to walk you through, and starting with the very simple, and then maybe adding some complexity as we go. So with the first one, I want to show you how you can capture leads from basically any form builder out there. So any form that you're using, and import them to your CRM. So this often comes about, like, let's say you're working at a company and the website's already set up, maybe even the tech team's handling the website. Anyone that fills out the website form automatically goes to your CRM system. But let's say you want to test out maybe different messaging, or you want to launch a new product and tech don't have the time to build all the necessary pages. So you want to build an MVP. Yeah. So using these form builders are a great way to actually do that, but you still want to make sure that the people that are filling out the form, that data is being passed back to your CRM. And this is one of the most simple and probably most common use cases for Make. So in this example, this is what we've already done actually for 9X. Alex had the genius idea of giving free consultations away to anyone that signs up to this form. So if you're lucky enough to discover the URL at the end, you can sign up to this form as well. The form builder that we're using is called Tally, but others out there include like Typeform is a very common one, Jotform, Cognitoform. Basically, what I'm going to show you, the logic is the same. So what we want to make sure is that when someone fills this form out, and we can see here, this is the published version. If you choose a premium Tally plan, you can even host this at your own domain, or you can embed this in a website. So building forms with these low-code form builders are really fast and a lot quicker than developing it on your own. And what we want is when someone fills this form out, we want this to end up into our CRM. And for this example, I'm going to use HubSpot here. So you can see now in my contacts, in my new leads table, this is empty. So what we want is whenever someone fills this form out, that they come into HubSpot. So let's see how Make can help us with this. So this is my Make scenario. And let me just zoom out a little bit here. So if it's anyone's first time, welcome to your first Make scenario. How this works is you can basically, these little bubbles are known as modules. And any tool that you want to integrate with, you can basically click the add button and add them here. So for instance, imagine if instead of syncing stuff to HubSpot, I wanted to send things to Salesforce. I can just type Salesforce here and drop this one in, and you get a bunch of actions, pre-made actions that you can do. So in our case, if we were doing it to Salesforce, we would want to create a record whenever someone fills out the form. In our example, we're using HubSpot. So first step is the tally form, and we're using the trigger called watch new form responses, which means, and you can see it here, triggers when a new form response is submitted. So let's test this one out and see what sort of data we get when someone submits a form. So instead of running the whole flow, I'm just going to run this module manually. And right now you can see it's waiting for new responses. So if I go to my live form that's here, let me fill this one in and hit book. You can see here, thanks for completing. And if I go back to my Make scenario, you can now see a little one appear. So some data has been received by Make. And if we look into this, it's got some data, some information about the response. And if we go to the fields, we see here the different fields of the form that have been submitted. Yeah. And now it's as simple as putting the next step in, which is going to HubSpot and adding create a contact action, create or update a contact. And if I go in here, my connection to HubSpot is already there. And now we basically have a bunch of fields. So HubSpot is one of the CRM with probably the most fields imaginable. And all you're doing is basically mapping the data that you're getting from Tally and matching it to the relevant field in HubSpot. So in our case, it's only 3 fields: first name, last name, and email. And I'll just show you how easy it is to map it. Basically in Make, whenever you are adding a field, you basically have access to all the data from the previous steps. So if I want to, in the email field, map the company email that was received in the form, I just map it this way. I said first name, last name. And then I've also manually mapped some other statuses. For instance, I want the lead status to be new because it's a new lead, and the lifecycle stage to be lead. And lastly, something that I think is always a nice sort of a cherry on top, I guess, is we want to, whenever a new lead comes in, and this really shows the versatility of Make, that you can add as many tools into these workflows as possible, is we also want to send ourselves a message on Slack so that we're notified whenever a new lead signs up, and we can react super quick and contact that lead and get them as a customer. So let's see how this works in reality. I'm going to run the whole scenario now, and it's waiting for a lead to come in. I'll go back and fill my form in. Now I need to use a fake name. So let's use Piv's favorite character. Okay. And submit. Perfect. If I go back to my Make scenario, you can see everything green, everything's run as it should. If I now go over to HubSpot, boom, you can see immediately that lead is now in my CRM. Right? Without using any code, just with a few instructions. Whenever a lead now signs up on the Tally form, it will be sent to HubSpot. And one important thing to know is I ran this manually just as a demonstration, but this Make scenario here, you can see a lightning bolt is basically instant. So now whenever new people submit the form, you don't need to actually run this manually. This will always push the information. And lastly, let's go over to Slack and check our inbound leads channel. And here you can see a new lead has submitted a form, Luke Skywalker, some data there. And how we got this data there Let me show you. So if we click on our Slack message, it's super simple. You basically connect to Slack. It'll like a few clicks and then you're connected. You can just simply select which channel you want to post to. And then you can also, rather than just matching these fields to an individual column, you can use multiple fields in a text block. So here I'm using some Slack formatting. For instance, these asterisks means that the text is going to be bold. Then I'm saying I want the first name space, the last name, the email. I want to pass the form name, so which form they signed up to. And lastly, which is very useful, I can actually take our HubSpot link and add the contact ID of the contact that I just created, so that now if I go back to Slack, we have this nice message. And if I click on this contact link, it will take me directly to HubSpot and I can see the lead that's just been created. Any questions so far? I see some chat happening.
Not so far, no.
Okay.
Super clear.
Perfect. Cool. So yeah, that's really like, as I said, probably one of the actions you'll use the most when you're using this, these no-code automation tools like Make, as a way of, if you're doing a sort of a separate process to your normal workflow, but you need to collect leads, send them to your CRM. This is a great example. And as I said, if we look here, Typeform is also supported. Many of these form builders will work similar to many CRMs, and same with many messaging systems. Yeah. All right. Then I will close these windows and we can move on to our next demonstration, which is one that's very close to my heart because it's based off a company that I used to work for. But here I want to show you how you can send dynamic emails to your users using your product data. So in general, you're going to be using maybe like an email software that's hosted somewhere else and it's not connected to your main database or an online database where you're having all your product data, but you still want to send dynamic emails to people using that production data. And so in our example, thanks to Philo from 9X who's set this one up, we basically have a mock company called Fresh 9X, and what they do is every single day, they have 3 meals that you can order on their online platform. And there's always going to be one meat meal, one vegetarian, and one vegan option. Yeah. And these rotate every single day. You can go on a platform and order them. And as the marketing team, it's basically our job to promote the day's menu to our users that have subscribed to getting emails, right? So if we go over to our email tool, in this example, I'm using an email tool called Sendinblue, and it's very similar to MailChimp, which I guess a lot of you have known about. And I would say that these sort of email providers are quite basic compared to your more complex ones like Salesforce Marketing Cloud or Customer.io, but with some automation on top, you can still achieve really great results with using simple email tools. So what you can see in our email tool, we have our contacts list, and each one of those contacts has their meal preference selected, whether they prefer dishes with meat in there or vegetarian meals or vegan meals. And we have these lists. So we have a list of our meat eaters, our vegetarians, and our vegans. And without automation, what we would need to do, so in terms of our campaigns, what we realized was sending emails to the users, it's much better off sending them one suggestion than maybe all 3. So we want to basically send, if you're down as your preference being a meat eater, we want to send you show you an email which suggests the daily meat dish of the day. Same goes for vegetarians and vegans. So without automations, what we'd need to do is we'd need to come into our email every day, go back to our database, find the image, download the image, then we'd need to copy paste that, upload that to our email software, change the dish title, change the date, and we're ready to go. Seems like not much work. There's 3 emails, but these are literally the type of tasks that will make marketing people want to kick themselves in the face, right? It's like 30 minutes that you have to do every single day. And on the flip side, it's also something that is highly business critical, right? If these emails don't go out, you can be sure that the number of orders will be far less. So what better way than to actually automate this? And this is what I want to show you how we could do this in Make. So let me open the second scenario here. And this one, we've added a little bit more logic into it, but we're going to go through it step by step, and it should be simple enough. So just like the, let me zoomed in a bit too far. Cool. Just like the Tally or CRM Airtable, which is where our production data is. So if anyone's not familiar with Airtable, it's sort of like a Google Sheets on steroids. It's sort of like a cloud database that you can use. And this is where our data is. In general, it doesn't matter if your data might be on any of the SQL providers. Make also has an integration with them, or any of these other cloud databases out there. So what we're going to use is an Airtable function called search records. And if I open this one up, here you can see I've connected my Airtable. I've selected the base, the Fresh9X base, and we are looking at the menu table. And then from the menu table, we use a formula to filter which records we want to retrieve from that table. So this is very similar to, like, if people are familiar with Excel, Airtable have their own formula where you can actually search this data down. And so each day we want to only take the meal of today. So in our case, the 27th of October. So that's what we filtered in this function. And let me just run this module so we can see what that looks like. We now see from this search, we have one result, one bundle, and we can see the different. So the meat dish is the Papa burger, the vegan dish, vegan burger, and the vegetarian dish as well. So all the data that we need to push to our CRM is there. The next step, what we want to do is now use our Send in Blue, our email marketing tool, and we want to use the functions that they have, which is listing all contacts. So when I list all the contacts, let me run this one only. Here we see we have a far more bundles. We actually have 50 of them. So for every contact, this returns one result, and we have their attributes. So their first name, their last name, and their preference. And how Make works, whenever you run a search like this, where you don't just return one result like we do here, but you return 50, what's going to happen is for every step of the scenario downwards, that's going to be repeated for each of these bundles. So what happens after here will happen 50 times. Yeah. So now we have our menu of the day. We have our 50 contacts. What we want to do is push that menu information to our email marketing tool. And to do that, if we go back to our contacts table, so we go back to our contacts, you can see here I've added some attributes, some user attributes for the date and the title and the image of the meal that we want to offer them today. And so in our Make scenario, all we need to do is use an update contact action so that we're pushing that data to each of those attributes. And where this extra logic comes in now is we want to make sure that if, for instance, let's select Amy. Amy is a meat eater. We want to make sure that we're suggesting Amy the meat dish that we've returned of the day. So then there is this Make function under tools. You can see some useful tools that you can use to control this logic visually instead of writing code. And this basically splits this up, and we can use filters to determine different paths. So when for each person here on this route, we've said that the preference needs to match vegetarian, so that we know only those with preference vegetarian will go down this path, vegan this path, and meat this path. So then in each of these update actions, we can just simply update the contact. We want to match their email address. And what we're updating here is the offer and the picture and the date. Yeah, so let me run this once. Right now you can see in my email marketing tool, there is no data here. Let me run this one and run once. And you can see now Make's doing to work. And here, one result, but now more results are happening down the path because it's iterating over those 50 items. And then after a few seconds, it's completed. If I now go back to my email marketing tool and refresh, we can now see all that data has been pushed and it's matching up correctly. So for the meat eaters, they're getting the Papa burger, the vegans are getting the vegan burger, and we have the image. So that's great. And now what this allows us to do, if we go back to our emails, if you remember the previous example, let me just exit out of this one. Previously, we were having to manually update. What's going on here? Yeah, we're having to manually duplicate each of these 3 different emails and update them on a daily basis. This can now be replaced with one dynamic email template. And if I edit the design here, you can see we're using placeholders to pull data from those attributes. And if I want to preview this one, now for each of my recipients, we basically see the different dish and the date being filled in. Yeah, so now instead of manually doing this data, that's happening automatically. And what's amazing is so far we've only got the vegans. Let me check. Amy, cool, she's getting the burgers. That's all being dynamically replaced. What's great with make is here you see instead of a lightning bolt, you have this clock symbol. And this means that this scenario would run on a schedule. So right now I've set it that every day at 6 a.m. this should run. Then we know, okay, great, all the data is in there and we can use another scenario to actually send this email on a daily basis. Perfect. I assume no questions, Alex?
No, I'm just trying to make funny comments, but it's not working.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
A really nice use case. I think we can move
Perfect.
on to the next one unless anyone has questions. No, I think. And you are unfortunately very clear. So
Good. All right. Third use case that I want to show you today is about taking your email marketing a little bit further. And the example that I want to show you is how you can collect user satisfaction with a one-click email survey. So I think what we can already easily do, and I think what most of you would know how to do quite easily, is you can set up an email. And let's say you're using a Typeform or Google Form or any of these form builders that I showed you before to collect feedback from your users. And a typical email might look like this. You ask them if they'd be willing to give us some feedback, and then with a link to take the survey, right? Links to a Typeform, perfect. Why do we need to over-engineer this? For me, the one downside of having it set up like this is that the vast majority of people are not going to give you the time of day to think, oh, click on a button, take the survey. They're probably thinking, okay, this is a massive survey. I don't want to waste my time. We need to basically reduce the barrier to entry massively to have more responses to a survey like this. And there's a reason why these are now installed in every single airport in the world, is these one-click surveys just work. And the fact that it's friendly emojis, this is something that's really nice to interact with. So what we want to create is an email where I can just send this message and the user can give one click, give that feedback, whether they're unhappy with their first experience or whether they love the product, just one click and we capture that information. So how do we do this in Make? And this gets into like a little bit of a more complex scenario, and it's using something known as webhooks. So what webhooks do, so this is the first one where it's not like a specific tool that we're using, but a function from Make. So Make have webhooks, and whenever you create a webhook, what it gives you a specific link or a URL that you can actually then use to send data to it. And whenever data is sent to this URL, the scenario will run. Yeah, and so let me show you, for instance, what this looks like if I paste the result here. So we have this URL, and what we're also able to do is actually add data to it using what's known as URL parameters. So anyone that's done any sort of maybe website tracking will be familiar with parameters in the URL that look like this: UTM source equals Google. For instance, anything after this question mark, these are known as query parameters, and they basically don't affect the base link, but you can use them to pass data to either the page or the destination of this URL, and that URL can then use this information. So in our case, what we need to do in our email tool, if we inspect each of these URLs, what I've basically done, and I'll copy this over to here, I've added a few parameters. So first of all, for the unhappy face, I've added the rating. So I've created a parameter called RTG for rating, and I've added the rating 1. And then I'm also, because I want to know which customers are giving me this feedback, I'm passing another parameter called CID or customer ID. And here I'm using a dynamic parameter from HubSpot to actually get the ID of the contact that we're sending the email to. So let's see how that data looks like when we bring it into Make. What I'm going to do is just run this module only, so the whole flow doesn't run. And here's an email that I sent to myself earlier. So let's say things are going good and I'm quite happy with it because I ran. This one will be explained in a second. What we can see now is I've clicked on that link and you can see this is the data coming in. So on top, HubSpot are actually adding their own tracking on top of this, but we see those two parameters that I added. The rating that I gave is 5 and my customer ID is 551. So what we want to do now is basically store this data somewhere. And in this example, I'm just using a simple Google Sheet, another tool that Make has an integration with. And you can see on the Google Sheets options, I want to add a row. So I've already created a Google Sheet here that will capture this data, the customer ID, the rating, and the date that they rated. And if I go back into Make, in my Google Sheets module, all I need to do is link up my Google account. Then I can select the spreadsheet, and in this case, email survey collection. You have a couple of options. And then just like everything else, I can basically map the data that's coming in from this webhook to the Google Sheet. And on top of that, I'm also using some of Make's pre-built variables. And in this case, I'm just going to take a variable that gives the current date. Yeah. So let's see how this looks like. Or actually, I'll explain the next part. One very useful thing of doing these one-click email surveys, it also allows you to manipulate a little bit the user behavior depending on how they rate your service. So what I've set up here is another logic where in this step here is only going to be for those that rate 5. And in this step, it's only going to be those that rate less than 5. Yeah. And the reason what I'm doing in this is a webhook response. So this is getting a little bit more technical in Make. So whenever you set up a scenario with a webhook, you can respond to that webhook. And one very useful function is you can send that person to another destination. So what I have set up here, I have 2 thank you pages. I have one which says, thanks for your feedback, but do you have some time to maybe give a bit of context into why you rated the way that you did? And we have another one, you can maybe guess which one's for which, where we say, thanks for your feedback. Do you mind sharing your feedback with more people and leaving us a Google review? So this is a way, so this Google review is one that I'm obviously only linking to for those that rate us 5. It's twofold. It's one, it's using this happy moment from the customer. When they've answered your email and said, hey, I'm really happy, maybe they're more willing to leave you a Google review. That obviously will improve your Google rating over time because you're only feeding people to your Google review that are happy with your service. And you can also use this, it doesn't need to be Google reviews, right? You could use this thank you page from the happy response to maybe ask if they'd be willing to refer a friend, and you can show your referral program here. But for those that are 4 or less and maybe a bit critical of your service, this is a great opportunity to collect further feedback and pass this on to your product team. So let's see how this looks like now in real. I'll go back to my scenario. I'll select run once. I'm going to go to my email and let's say I'm just medium about it. So let's do this here. And you can see it successfully redirected me to the feedback page. If we go to our Make scenario, you can see what's happened. So the data's come in, rating 3. The Google Sheet ran. So let's check how that works. If I go to my Google Sheet, perfect. You can see that data's come in there. So as more people rate, this would basically be filled down the chain. Great. And last of all, it obviously successfully redirected to the feedback page. So this one was a bit more, I guess, complex with using webhooks. Any questions on webhooks, or is that something that people are already familiar with?
There was a question from Alexandre Crosby regarding, I think it was at the end of the second use case, but students were still dealing with emails here. Would you use the same stack? So I guess this was the stack from the previous use case. Would you use the same stack to manage transactional emails?
So a lot of these tools, they would have a different one. So the ones I can think of is SendGrid is probably the most popular for transactional emails. And I would use any of these. So if your tool offers transactional emails, you can basically use it here. So I'm not sure if Send in Blue, let me check, because there it's more about campaigns. Yeah, so Send in Blue, I don't think is probably the best example for transactional, but if you're looking at SendGrid, now it's not working for me. Here you can basically contacts, if we go to messages, where is it now? Yeah, send an email. So SendGrid is probably the most popular transactional email tool. What's great is you can visually create your emails in SendGrid, and then you can use Make to actually trigger the transactional email. So I waffled on a little bit there. Short story is yes, you can use Make to send transactional emails.
And in general, it's maybe not using SendGrid because it has transactional email as functionality is generally not a good idea to use an email provider that is not going to have transactional email and trying to recreate that feature with Make.
Exactly.
It's better to leverage a SaaS that already has that as a core functionality. And then the extra logic that you might need to have for your use case or for your company can be built with Make, but leverage SaaS tools that already have this as their core function.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a really good example, Alex, because what you're talking about there with SendGrid, when you want to send an email, all you need to provide is the email address that you want to send to and the template that you're using, and it takes care of the rest. If you wanted to recreate that with Send in Blue, for instance, and Send in Blue works that it has a campaign has recipients, and then you send a message. So to recreate that same one-step thing, you'd have to add a campaign, add a recipient to the campaign, and then trigger the campaign. So really, as you said, yeah, transactional for transactional, and use the campaigns as they're meant to be used.
Nice. And I think that's so far the only question we had.
Perfect. Cool. Then last of all, let's get into, let me discard changes, the last of the scenarios. We'll close this one. Okay, for me, this is probably one of the most used that I've also used in previous companies, and something that I would really advocate. So automating KPI reporting. I think something that's happened a lot for me over my career in marketing is you'll walk into the office at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, and the CEO who's been busy digging into stuff will be like, hey, Jan, what's our cost per lead? Hey, Jan, how many users have we got on the website at the moment? Hey, Jan, how many new customers did we onboard last week? There's so many numbers that you need to keep on top of your head. And when I get those questions, the answer I would have liked to say is, oh yeah, sure, you can see it in Google Analytics, or here, there's this dashboard that I shared last week. The thing is, when you have these dashboards set up, they're great, but the thing is people tend not to check them so much. So for me, where there's these key numbers that you need to know, make it as easy as possible as yourself to receive that information regularly. And for me, one of the number one ways to do that is via the messaging tool that you're using. So whether it's Google Hangouts or Slack, having the data being sent to you. So there's, all it is you're in Slack anyway, and you see on a daily basis what was the ad spend we had yesterday. And you see this every single day. You'll tend to start remembering these numbers a lot easier, and you don't need to force yourself to always check these dashboards and switch your focus from what you're doing. So then in the example I want to show you today, we're going to talk about automating your Google Analytics for reports. But I just want to point out there are so many things you can automate the reporting for, and the logic is exactly the same. So if you are running Facebook ads, you can use the Facebook Insights Manager to get insights for the selected ad account or campaign, right? You can say, what was the spend? How many leads did we get? If you are using LinkedIn. Now this search doesn't want to work for me. So the same goes for LinkedIn ads, whether you're doing social media and you want to automate your posts. If you're using an Instagram business account or a LinkedIn page or a Facebook business, you can get insights in terms of how many people liked your posts, how many people commented, how many people shared. This is the type of stuff that whatever is your responsibility and your number that you should be tracking, have it sent to you on a daily basis so you don't need to worry about it. And especially for ad campaigns, what's good is when you set them up and you want to leave them for a little bit, rather than constantly checking and refreshing, seeing if the number's changing, set yourself a daily update that gets sent to you, and it will just take a lot of workload off of your plate. In our case, when I look at Google Analytics, so right now, Make have support for the old version of Google Analytics, which was called Universal Analytics. So you can see here, you can build a report in Google Analytics and Make can actually retrieve the results of that search. Unfortunately, now, maybe some of you know this, that Universal Analytics is being phased out in July of next year. So we've already set up the Go9X website, for instance, and this is running the new Analytics 4. A lot of the tools, Make and Zapier, don't have support for this yet, but they are working on it. But until then, there is a nice workaround that we can use. And we go back to our trusted Google Sheets on steroids, which is called Airtable. And in Airtable, you'll find a nice extension known as Data Fetcher. And Data Fetcher is actually a free tool where they've already provided the reports for GA4. So you can set up your Google Analytics reports and have these automatically put into your Airtable for you. So you can see what I've done here is I have 4 tables. I have a daily traffic report, and this is just me picking what metrics we want to worry about right now for 9X. So we have obviously the date, and this is being run every single day. The total users, new users, sessions, engaged sessions. So this is, I think, a new metric from GA4, which is quite cool, saying of the people that actually go to your site, how many stay at least 10 seconds, check out 2 pages, or do 1 conversion event. So this is really useful to see how many real authentic sessions are you having on your website. So I've got this just overall stats. And then since we want to know what channels are bringing in the most traffic, I've got another report that basically segments this by the session source and the session medium. Yeah. So every day, what channels are bringing in what traffic. Yeah. And so like we saw before, all we need to do in order to automate this is to set up a search. And maybe before we get into it, so that you can see the end result, let me show you what this looked like on Slack. Is in Slack, I have a channel called Website Stats, and every single day at 7 in the morning, I'm getting the results from the 2 days before. Yeah, so you can see every single one, and I'm also have a weekly one that's sent every Tuesday, giving the stats from the previous week. Now you might ask, okay, why am I getting it from 2 days before? This is a little quirk with Google Analytics that if you're getting data from their API, it can take up to 24 hours for when someone visits your site, it takes up to 24 hours for that data to actually be processed in Google Analytics. So if you want to be sure that you're always getting the most up-to-date, almost accurate data, then you basically would be checking always the website data from 2 days before. But for me, having this on Slack every single day just makes it a lot easier. The numbers in my head now. Next time Alex asks me, Jan, how many people are checking out our website, the numbers in my head, or worst case, it's 1 click away when I open Slack. So how do we do this? First of all, our very first Airtable search is we are checking the daily traffic by source and medium. So this is the one where we will have for each day, we will have many results, right? So the daily traffic, you can see for yesterday, we had some coming from LinkedIn, Direct, Google, and No Code Club. When I run this result, and then just let me show you the filter again here. Very similar filter to what we had in the menu example. I'm just basically saying, give me all results from 2 days ago so that we can make sure the data has actually been processed by Google Analytics. So when I run this one only, I can see here, instead of just 1 result, I'm getting 3 because we have 3 different tools that actually brought us traffic. Or even more, I think it's because I set a limit. Yes, I set a limit of 3. So in my message that you saw on Slack, I want to every day give some total numbers, but I also want to break down the top 3 sources. Yeah, so in Airtable, I have the formula here. I'm taking the top 3 sources from the source and medium table. And then as I explained before, whenever there's a module in Airtable that returns more than one result, so in our case, we return 3 different bundles, everything down the line from it will happen 3 times, 1 for each bundle. And we obviously don't want 3 Slack messages being sent every single day. So this is another really useful tool that allow you to control the logic, which is an aggregator. So you can actually take multiple results and merge them into one. So let me just do a little quick hack here so I can show you how that looks like. When I run this, and I've only run the first 2 steps, while we have 3 bundles coming out here, in the aggregator, what it does, it creates one bundle, but in that bundle is an array with the 3 different items that I've selected. So I get the stats that I need to use in the message, and I get them in one item. So that means that afterwards, now it's only going to run once down the line. Does that sort of make sense? Hopefully no questions. Cool. So then I've got my traffic by source. And now I just need to do another call to Airtable. And here I'm getting my overall stats. So instead of the daily traffic report by source and medium, I'm getting the daily traffic report. I put a limit of 1 because I know it's only going to be 1 result each day. And when I run this, there you can see the overall results. And all I have to do then is lastly put in a Slack message. And you can feel free, you can add your emojis, you can format it how you like. In terms of the arrays, it does get a little bit complicated, that you basically need to say, for instance, here in the top sources, I'm saying I want to take the first item of each of these. Then the second, it looks a little bit messy, but what's really cool is you're not writing any code here, right? You're just getting the variables. So let's say if I want to add another metric to this, let's say for the third one, I want to go into the array and I want to take the number of total sessions, not just the engaged sessions. I can click that. And I need to say that I want it from the third result. Let me say, okay, if I save this, and now let me run the whole scenario. Perfect. It's all green. Let me check back to Slack. And there we have it. We have the same reports being duplicated again, just been sent. And here we have that new item that I added there. So yeah, really quick, really easy. Yeah, that's basically the demonstration that I wanted to show you guys.
We have one question from Casio. So when you tap on the plus button to add an integration to a scenario, it lists a lot of possibilities.
Yes.
What are your main sources to get to know these possibilities besides experience and spending your life in Make? And wait, there's more thing in the chat. And are there some communities or formulas repository for common tasks?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So really great question. In general, the first thing, I guess, like how I know about them, in general, it's more about it's tool first, always selecting in general, the tools that I'm using also have Make integrations. But in terms of like getting to know them, Make actually have some really cool resources. Let me see if I can find them right now. And if you go on templates, so they have a bunch of templates to get you started, and it's actually filtered based on your function. So if we go to marketing, probably would have been a useful resource to give me ideas for this demonstration, actually. You can see, okay, ads, conversions, and audiences. Add Facebook leads to a Google Sheet, save new leads in Facebook. So really, they're giving you a lot of templates. And when you use a template, those modules are already there and you can just monitor and basically add your connections. And lastly, for apps and services, they also have a really nice search function here. So let's say we were talking about form builders before. If I'm like, okay, I need to pick a form builder, but I only want one that has an integration with Make. If I search form, you can already see the main ones coming up. I hope that answers your question, Casio.
It's super nice. And maybe also one thing, if you're not very familiar with integration platforms, or you are, let's say, you're platform agnostic, and you want to get to the simplest way to make your scenario work, you have the same type of page on Zapier, for instance, and it's worth comparing what are the modules available, what are the actions available, and whether there's maybe already a template that does exactly what you're looking for. So then you don't have to, you just have to maybe connect your different tools and the logic is already built for you. And since both platforms, or those platforms tend to be, pay per action, having a Zapier subscription for some operations and having a Make subscription for others in parallel is a very common practice and not a problem. So you can make your life easier by comparing every time, okay, which platform allows me to do that most easily.
Exactly. And like what's even great is just like you can receive webhooks, you can also send them. So even let's say you have a big scenario working in Make, but there's an integration that only Zapier does. You can also actually push data from Make to Zapier, sort of like horses for courses, which is really useful.
Cool. And we have another question from Clemens.
Maybe just before I can get this part out of the way, before we get into questions, just some official stuff to get out of the way, and then we can get back into the
promotional part. Yes.
Exactly. So, yeah, what we do have coming up. So for anyone who's is interested in no code, how they can leverage it at work, we have our next automation bootcamp starting on the 7th of November. If you're after more information, you can check out on our website. In general, we're sort of working with companies where the companies are sort of putting some of their employees into the bootcamp. So it is something that if you have any sort of training budget, General you could actually use that for this automation bootcamp. So feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, it's a 12-week program, but it is part-time. So you probably need to allocate maybe 3 or 4 hours a week. The first 8 weeks are dedicated to learning everything you need to become to develop an automation first mindset. And in the last 4 weeks, what's really cool is we actually work together with you and give you one-on-one support for you to build your first automation project. And in general, we found the best results when you're actually building something for your work and your employer. And it's really rewarding to see how your work can be automated. And one last plug for anyone who's just in general interested. Basically, if anyone wants to fill out that form that I showed at the start of the webinar, 9X are giving a free consultation to startups on how they can leverage no code at their work. So if you're interested, go9x.com/AMA, which is Ask Me Anything. Click on that and you can join. Get a free consultation. Maybe Piv can post a link in the Zoom.
He's on it.
Good. All right. Now, Clemens had a question.
Yes. So Clement wrote a great presentation and use cases. Thanks for it. Well, that was not the question, but
thanks.
You can take it. I have one question out of curiosity. So in a previous role, one very tedious process we struggled with was gathering information about target companies. For example, general company info, job posts, descriptions, their data stack. If possible, how would you automate this process? Which tools would you use for this? And I already asked a clarifying question. So where is this data that you're looking for? Because the answer depends mostly on the source. I guess there are multiple sources. But he said primarily focus on the website, so the company website in question. Yeah.
So is it after this data for potential customers or competitors?
I think it's trying to get information about potential customers. I think, going into scraping things and this kind of stuff, the dirty stuff.
Yeah, for me, one that springs to mind, which gives this, but like a lot of these tools, so know that they come at quite a price because they do bring that information is very valuable. So I know Clearbit is one. I was lucky enough to work with Clearbit when it sort of first came on the market, and it was very, very cheap. And now it's a very, very expensive tool. But Clearbit's one was, I think they have a few options. One is they have a database where you can actually then potentially enter the URL of a company or a customer. And on top, another solution that they have is it's something you can add on to your website, and then you can actually get notified when someone from that company is viewing your website. So that's one I would check out. I don't know, Alex, if from your SaaS experience, if you have any others.
I mean, Clearbit is probably the high range in terms of price.
Yeah.
I think it also depends on your industry. So we remember having a couple of calls with VCs and PAVE last year. They are looking for startups. Maybe the source here changes. So more interesting to get data from Crunchbase or from Dealroom, or try to scrape AngelList. I don't know if it's possible because it's very well protected. And basically the approach to getting that data. So first, if there is a service available via API, for example, Clearbit, then obviously you would want to connect to that service first. If not, there's Piv's favorite topic, scraping, where you can still extract information from existing websites or from a directory. But for that, you have a little bit more work. Maybe Piv, you want to explain a bit what your passion is?
No, but I also shared as a pretty interesting one, which is a proxy curl, which is an API that allows you also to get some information based on the domain of the company. So obviously, for every industry, you have different resources, but proxy curl is not that known, but it's pretty has a lot of information. So that's one I would recommend. And when it comes to scraping, so it really depends whether or not the place where you're getting the information from allows you to scrape it. So you can try to do extracting information from LinkedIn, but I wouldn't recommend, because then you end up in a situation where you're having a live session and you can't stream that live because somehow LinkedIn blocked you because you've been using too much of that stuff, like we had today. So you need to be very careful with doing stuff like Phantom Buster. But you can also do scraping using, there's a nice tool out there with a very generous free plan, which is called Parse Hub. It will require you to understand a bit of potentially CSS selector, but actually there's also the ability to click on pages and to build what's called a scraping model, where basically you say, okay, whenever you go to a URL, I want, and that's going to be the page, I want you to say this, and that information. And then what you only need to do is you need to be able to tell Parse Hub to go on a list of URLs. They're always structured the same way, and then it will extract information. So that's pretty useful to build scraping logic when you have startup directories like startup.com, or if you have a page that lists all of your potential customers, like a repository of car dealers, repository of specific actors of one market, then you can try to scrape that. The problem is scraping is something that has appeared and developed over the years, and then these pages usually build the protection, so they will try to prevent you from scraping. Like I remember when we studied 9x, we used to scrape Xing because like the German market wasn't used to scraping, so actually
we might have scraped Xing.
Yeah, we might have allegedly.
Yeah.
Some people say that people did.
Maybe it's described here, but maybe we didn't.
But it doesn't work anymore. But Parse Hub was the way we use that. So yeah, Parse Hub is a good one. I think there's another one that the mate use, which is called Octoparse, if I'm not mistaken. The problem with parsing, it easily gets a bit.
I think I think we've covered the answer, Pip. I know sometimes I need to cut you off.
Exactly.
But cool, nice. Any other questions? Because we are already a few minutes over, and I'm noting some people, but like we're fine to stay. So if you have any other questions, interested to also know, are these some things that people have already automated or given some inspiration? Cassio, are you going to stop being a developer and become a no-coder?
Yeah, no answer from Cassio. Maybe, let's see.
Thanks, Eileen. All righty.
Cool.
Then, as I said, feel free. You can find us. Go to the website, go9x.com. Otherwise, did we end up doing the live stream, Piv? Did it work? I noticed at one point it said live.
Yeah, but no, LinkedIn blocked me. So
yeah. Then once the automation bots kick in and we have the recording, we will be posting this to LinkedIn. So feel free to check out that if you want the recording, and then share it around.
Thanks, Jan. Super session. Thanks a lot.
Nice.
Thanks everybody for joining. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.